Go back in, it turns off again. They come back out, it turns on again.
Okay, that argues, thank you very much, against poltergeist activity.
Exactly, which makes us think that we don't know what's going on, that we're babes in the woods, and it suggests that there may be something in certain environments that may infect susceptible people, like a psychovirus, and alters them energetically, that they can leave and carry some of it with them.
All right, on that note, stay right there. Dr. Barry Taff is my guest. All right, back now to Dr. Barry Taff. Dr. Taff, we were talking about the nature of whatever these things are. One of my favorite movies of all time happens to be Altered States. God, I thought that was a good movie.
No, it's exceptional.
Now, in a sensory, it was all about a sensory deprivation chamber. And I've often wondered about these chambers. You're lowered into, I guess, some probably body temperature water or something, and they close this thing like a giant casket over you. And here you are with nothing to hear, nothing to see, nothing to feel, nothing to taste, nothing at all. All your senses are deprived. What can occur? I mean, I saw the movie, of course, but what really can occur?
Well, it seems that when normal sensory cognition is suppressed or inhibited, a subtler form of communication takes over. And regarding the paranormal in general, one of the best techniques for eliciting or provoking mental psi in people is called Gonfeld, which is not as dramatic as sensory deprivation tanks, but it's similar in the sense it's like half ping pong balls over the eyes and sitting in front of a red safety light, and then white noise pumped through headphones into your ears. And what this does, it produces a sense of disorientation, and you can't tell if you're standing up or seated or whatever. You lose your spatial and temporal orientation, and your mental imagery stands out much more intensely in this condition than it does normally, because your senses are rendered essentially useless. And
so, in other words, then you do eventually enter a true altered state if all senses are deprived, because you begin entering an area of the mind that you don't spend time in any other time.
Correct.
I hear you. I'm going to take you down several different roads, and you may not understand why I'm doing it, but I'll get there.
Okay.
I want to read a fax that I just got. Hi, Art. There was an excellent report on remote viewing the other night on Los Angeles UPN 13 with Major Ed Dames, a man I've interviewed. I'm sure you know who he is.
Yes.
If I had recorded it, it would be up on the web. It's one thing to hear him talking about it, but the report actually showed one of his top remote viewers actually work on a target. The target was chosen by the news cameraman, and the photographer chose the reference numbers. The target was a recent helicopter crash in L.A., and the remote viewer accurately identified not only the helicopter, but the cause of the crash as well, without any clues or idea what the target could have been. It was, in short, amazing. It really made a believer out of the reporter and a lot of other people, too. Looks like the Major's company, SciTech, is doing well, thank you, David, in Central California. Now, we have talked about entities, ghosts, poltergeists, whatever in the hell they are. We talked about altered states, and now, for a second, remote viewing. Is remote viewing, Doctor, in your opinion, real?
Oh, yes. I mean, essentially what remote viewing is, it's a combination of telepathy, clairvoyance, precognition, retrocognition. It's an integration of all these different aspects of psi that we've given a scientific label to, because science doesn't like terms like telepathy and precognition, because it goes back too far in time. It rings more of psychical research than of modern science. But when remote viewing works, which is not all the time, but when it does work, it can be incredibly precise and detailed. And one of the reasons why there's such an attempt to, I guess, disinform people on what went on with the government's programs for the last 25 years was that it worked very well, and they never quite figured out, nor has anyone else, how it works or why it works. It's sort of like, again, we can't sit the forest for the trees. And the people that spend all this money want to make sure that no one uses it against them. So what they do is they basically deny it worked. They reevaluate this these statistical models and programs they had and said, oh, it was coincidence, it was luck.
There's only one problem with all of that, and that is that I have interviewed almost every single one of the major players in the government's remote viewing program, and to the man, they may argue about this or that, but to the man, every single one of them said, of course it works.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. When it works, it's deadly accurate. Some of the details that came out of the work were very impressive. I don't care how you alter the numbers or how you reevaluate statistics. Information's information. The question is, what's going on? How is it that human beings can perceive events that are, remote to us in space, from us in space and in time?
And in time as well, that's right.
Because it implies that a part of our consciousness, basically, is linked to every other part of space and time.
Here, here. Now I'm going to yank you in another direction, and that is to UFOs. And your recent book, Aliens Above, Ghosts Below, Explorations of the Unknown, obviously begins to deal, if it talks about aliens, it has to deal in some way with UFOs. We have objects that are traveling through our atmosphere, plenty of documentation, believe me, government satellites and more, 25,000 miles an hour, zigzagging through the atmosphere. Totally impossible, at least for us, without turning to pure jelly. So I presume we are not the ones doing it. A ton of evidence that UFOs are really something. We don't know what, they really are something. A lot of people are beginning to believe that rather than interstellar travelers, we have on our hands dimensional travelers. It's as good a theory as any other. What do you conclude when you look at UFOs and the whole alien phenomena?
Well, if these intelligences can travel vast, whatever they are, if they can, let's say we're looking at interstellar travel, not intergalactic, just interstellar for the most part.
All right.
If they can traverse the distances in real time, not over hundreds, thousands, or millions of years,
right,
they have to be able to travel through some sort of dimensional shift, whether it's, rotating wormholes or quantum singularities. Otherwise, they couldn't get here. So there may not be a lot of difference between dimensional jumping or shifting and interstellar travel at superluminal speeds. But the bottom line is, this technology that by whatever's visiting us, is so superior to us, it would be like us looking at amoeba.
What made you take the leap from being a parapsychologist to, in some ways, becoming a ufologist in this book? I mean, what made you investigate UFOs? Why did you go after that?
Well, first of all, I've been reading about it since I was a child, but what really, for me, was the sort of the cornerstone of my divergence was the fact that we've had numerous cases that began as poltergeist manifest or poltergeist outbreaks, and that evolved into abductions, or a CE3 or an abduction, or that began as a CE3 or an abduction and evolved into a poltergeist outbreak, or what we call paranormal fallout.
Really?
And the question is, why? Well, I mean, what's going on here? Why does one, and, this has been discussed by many other people. I mean, Jacques Vallée in Passport to Magonia and Invisible College, he wrote about this, and in his book subsequent to that, he's referenced it. There seems to be something regarding our consciousness and the paranormal. Whatever these vehicles are, these technologies coming here, may use forces we call paranormal the way we use electromagnetism.
Well, we have so many reports of their appearing, disappearing, of morphing into different shapes, of doing things that, and I had a very, very interesting conversation earlier in the day with somebody that I've had dealings with for some time, Robert Bigelow. He's a gazillionaire, and he puts grant money into science, looking in past years at two areas, and that was life after death, whether there really is such a thing, and UFOs, or these objects that traverse our atmosphere that we know are here now. In my discussion with him earlier today, he's trying to decide where to put this grant money, basically, and come up with a way to decide where it would be best used. We both began to talk about our collective feeling that poltergeists, ghosts, remote viewers, UFOs, everything that we've just been talking about is, in the end, when and if we ever understand them, there is going to be a common thread through all of them. And it may have to do with dimensional travel. It's hard to say at this point. But what do you think of that idea that everything we just talked about is really connected?
Well, I'm convinced beyond reasonable doubt that this phenomenon is into the relationships between the paranormal and psi and UFOs is definitely there. I mean, it's demonstrable, and it's very clear to anyone that's investigated this for a long enough period of time. The question is, it may tell us something about our reality, about our universe we live in, that we may not want to hear and we may not be too comfortable with once we know it.
I agree with you.
Because it suggests very strongly that the universe is ordered, it is not chaotic, that there are intelligences vastly superior to us that understand it far better than we ever will, at least for the foreseeable future.
I agree.
And that we might be someone else's guinea pigs, and we may have been that for thousands of years, and there may be very high factions in, let's say, governments that might know this. And the last thing they want to do is tell the people they govern, oh, guess what? We're being manipulated by higher intelligences. There's nothing we can do about it, but continue to vote and continue to pay your taxes. And they can, oh, by the way, they can also violate our airspace at their discretion, and there's not a darn thing we can do about it.
Well, I think we're getting closer. And somebody with the resources of Robert Bigelow is perhaps just what I've been looking for and just what all science in this area has been looking for. It's absolutely riveting. In other words, there is something absolutely real here. And here was the second part of our discussion. I suggested to him, you recall the Brookings report, study done for the government that said things would fall apart if such a revelation were made. It's been 30 years since that Brookings report, and one of the things I suggested to him is that we commission another 30 years of movies about aliens and people like yourself telling us what's occurred in the paranormal world. 30 years since then. Let me ask you, if such a study was done today, what do you think the answer would be? If the question was, how would the American public react?
That's a hard question to answer, Art, because the problem, the reason it's hard, because it's a very subjective response, and that it's so subjective because, see, unless these things affect your daily life and alter what you feel about yourself and the world around you, people don't care. It's cocktail hour talk. It's, movie of the week stuff. It's going up to see the biggest blockbuster feature film about it. But when it affects your life, what you believe about where you come from, where you're going, what your family does, if you should pay taxes, if you should believe and trust your government, that's when and also the biggest thing, if it shatters your belief in your Godhead, in religion, and that's a real big thing for Western society.
My guess, and that's all it is because we'd have to do the study and maybe we're going to, but my guess would be that Brookings would be every bit as true today as it was 30 years ago. I'd almost be willing to lay money on it.
I think it'd be more true today, because when I've lectured about this subject matter over the last, let's say, 25 to 30 years, and I bring this up, especially around Christmas or Easter, the reaction is almost knee-jerk in response. It's fear, it's paranoia, and it's extreme. The irritability levels skyrocket.
Anger.
And anxiety.
A lot of anger.
It's like you're pulling out their humanness. You're telling them that they have a inconceivable past and an unimaginable future.
That's right.
And no one likes that uncertainty before them. And, it's like at some point we will be doing whatever these other intelligences are to other life forms. We're doing it on Earth today. We're just not as good as they are. We're acting as God to higher life forms because we can manipulate them genetically, biologically, chemically, neurochemically, whatever. These things can seem to be able to do it at a much more discreetly than we do, and they're better at it. Because they've been around longer, maybe.
Well, in your new book, what did you look at? When you looked at UFOs, what did you look at?
Well, the first thing was Chapter 7. It's called Anatomy of an EBE, and I made a very clear connection with the fact that a model for the dinosaur, for what it would have evolved into, called the dinosauroid, it was talked about in Omni in 1980.
Right.
That image is exactly, almost exactly what people describe when they're abducted. Now, is that coincidence?
I don't think so.
Are we seeing a species that evolved from reptiles into a humanoid reptile and is coming here and is playing God with us? Or is maybe trying to, maybe, as I said in Chapter 10, UFO's the bottom line, maybe these beings know something about our future we don't. And maybe we're being hybridized, as people like Bud Hopkins and Dr. David Jacobs say, because maybe they know we won't be here very long, or maybe there'll be a catastrophe, or maybe they're trying to populate a star in another system and recreate what they did here, but with a little minor alteration. And we're basically, you know, if we're being used as guinea pigs in genetic source material, that's not something you divulge to your population. I mean, look at Bud Hopkins' last book, Witnessed. It's an exceptional book, and you know, assuming it's all as it appears to be, it's one of the most extraordinary cases on record.
Undeniable.
Right, and the bottom line is, the only thing our government really cares about, in you know, one line they frequently give out about UFOs is it does not represent a threat to national security.
Right, that's not denial of their presence.
Right, they've never said that. They say, well, of course there's no threat.
That's just sort of an explanation about why we don't investigate these things. Ha ha.
Right, now why, if there are no UFOs, why are they even saying there is no threat? See, that's another oxymoron. That's a double negative.
Well, lately, these UFOs, Doctor, have been showing up over our nuclear facilities.
Oh, yes, in the mid-'70s, they were various SAC bases and nuclear facilities.
Now, I don't know how the military defines threat to national security, but if it's not a threat when one of these things hovers above our nukes, then I'm not a talk show host.
Right.
Hold on, Doctor. We'll be right back.
I'm going to manifest itself in different ways.
I know.
As far as the UFOs, you don't know where they'll be, so you have to sort of be very mobile in order to get there. When you deal with hauntings or, you know, apparitions, they're sort of locked into space, they're in a semi-controlled, finite environment. You can go there, and it all comes down to instrumentation. The only thing people are going to believe in is instrumented recordings, is optical or acoustic recordings or imaging systems that show us information that we can pretty well determine can't be explained prosaically.
Okay, before I let it go, I don't want to do that. I know that you've got a recording or two. You mentioned that to me before the program. What do you have? Okay,
this is part of one of our archival tapes. This is from 1976, and this is a man, I should sort of set this up. This is a man who claimed that he was sort of abducted, and there were strange lights around him, strange sounds.
Yes.
We dumped him on his bed once, and we saw a ring of fire burst around him and shoot up in the air, but there was no accelerant on the bed. His kid kept disappearing and reappearing, and anyway, at one point my colleague and I were at his house, and he collapsed. He passed out. He started making these really weird sounds. Most of them are just rubbish, you know, gibberish.
Yes.
But there were a couple sounds coming out of his mouth that we recorded with our own amplified mic and our tape, which defy explanation because when put through analysis, they produce what pure sine waves, which humans nor animals can make.
Okay.
And it's a little spooky, and I'm not going to play the entire tape because it's far too lengthy, but I'll play an excerpt from it here, and you can hopefully hear it well enough to sort of get a grasp of what we dealt with.
Okay, this was done as the man was collapsed on the bed?
This is as the man passed out, and he was laying face down on the desk, and we kind of turned him over because he was, you know, we couldn't hear him, and we put the mic up to his mouth, and he was sort of in a trance.
Okay.
And this is the sound that we recorded, okay?
All right, fire away.
Return to source. There's no room for you here. Leave. There's no room for you here. Leave. small encapsulated version of what we dealt with. This was in March of 1976, and the last thing he said was, "Give me your lives," and, you know, we just like, what?
What? No, I didn't hear that part.
Yeah, that was the last thing he said was, "Give me your lives," and we thought, what? And it was very hard to discern, but there was a resonance in his voice that was inexplicable. The first thing you heard was like a howling. That was the first sine wave.
Listen to me, that didn't even sound human. I mean, not even close. Now,
people that analyzed the tape, two different firms said that we were basically being fooled. This was a machine we were recording. This was not a human, because humans can't make sounds like this. And, you know, what do you make out of it? I mean, that's those strange sounds, and I mean, you know, we were there. I mean, it was my microphone.
Can you do me, just rewind it just a little bit and play a little more of it, and then the end again? I want to hear where he said that.
Okay, let me see if I can.
Just sort of give it a best shot. Rewind a little bit.
Look at me. Wait. Return to source. There's no room for you here. Leave. There's no room for you here. Leave. Give me your life. You cannot have our lives. I'll leave.
Oh, man.
That was a little disconcerting.
Weird. Boy, do I have something you need to hear now. I interviewed Robert W. Morgan recently.
Oh, the radio show DJ.
No.
Oh.
No, the Bigfoot investigator.
Oh, okay.
And he taped a Bigfoot. He's got a tape of a Bigfoot. And now that you've played that, I think you should hear this. A lot of science was done on the recording you're about to hear, and it also was confirmed that it definitely was not a human voice. It'll take a little listening. Listen to this. See if you can make out what's said at the end here. Now listen. That's it. They repeated it, obviously, what seemed to be speech at the very end there. What'd you think of that?
Well, pretty intriguing, to say the least. It was, I mean, I think I've heard clips of that elsewhere, but it doesn't sound very human.
No, it doesn't sound very human. And the voices that you played, the voice you played, definitely didn't sound human. How in heaven's name does such a sound come from a human mouth?
I don't know. I mean, you know, the case didn't evolve into anything we could really sink our teeth into, but after a certain point, due to the distress and the trauma the man was experiencing, this was in Anaheim in 1976, his hair turned like white literally within a matter of days, and he was in his mid-30s. So
that would have done it for me.
And so, you know, what do you make of this? And, you know, we can't. I mean, all we know is we saw the fires erupt around him, and we heard of things happening. We recorded the sound, and we had it analyzed by some different people, and everyone said, you know, you've been duped. This is a machine. I said, well, no, we were there. We ruled that out. It was not a machine. So, you know, I mean, I'll tell you, I've lost more friends and acquaintances from discussing these types of matters and playing tapes like this. It's one woman I knew back in '93. She was dying to go to a haunting we had. We brought her out to one in Beverly Hills, and even though nothing happened, she knew enough about what had transpired prior to her coming to on the case that she broke out in a cold sweat and ran into the house screaming.
Yeah.
And she goes, I can't deal with this. I just can't imagine these things happening and you know, being around. She goes, I'd probably have a heart attack.
Well, I'm in that category. I'm so absolutely fascinated by all this, but let me tell you something. During a program I did, I can't remember when it was, a few months ago, my audience knows, all of a sudden, there was this gigantic, it's like 200 pounds hit my door, studio door, and I just about came out of my skin, and I opened the door quickly. Nothing there, nothing. I go into the other room, my wife's asleep, 3 cats asleep on the bed with her. That's it. Nobody else in the house. Now, I didn't see the door at the time, but there's no way that door could not have almost come off its hinges. I still have absolutely no explanation for that, but I'm saying this to illustrate, I mean, I almost became incontinent. I'm saying this to simply illustrate the difference between talking about it, hearing a tape, and having it happen to you. I almost came apart.
Yeah, I've seen, you know, novice researchers run into things. We had a case in '92 where part of a room began to violently shake as if there was a localized quake under part of a room in a house. And one of our novice researchers just ran out. He couldn't take it. And I said, why were you scared? He says, the room was shaking. There was nothing making it shake, but I saw you people shaking, but we weren't. And yet the wall was shaking, and he said, how do you explain it? I said, I don't, but that's why we're here.
Right.
And it's luck.
Right. That's,
that
to me,
got to experience it.
Normal human behavior, just to have the, you know what scared out of you. All right, doctor.